Hi and welcome back to the next video. This is video number 2, and this time we are setting up our Angular front end. We make it startable with a Docker file and Docker Compose. We are proxying like requests against our backend service, so our nest.js API, and with this we are displaying like a simple value that we get from our backend API. So when we are done here, we have like a good foundation with our front end and backend to go on with the next steps in the next videos. And yeah, the structure here is as always, first we now look at the outcome of this video, then we read the user story, then we implement everything, and at the end we check against the criteria from the beginning. And of course, like the timestamps are in the description, so you can always like skip to the parts that you are interested in. So let's have a quick look at our outcome here for this video. So what you see here, we have our Angular front end being set up. We are having like also a proxy configuration against our backend. We are starting everything with Dockerfile. We have it in Docker Compose. We have made like a simple connection against our backend with a service to display a simple value from our backend in our HTML. And everything here you can see is being run with Docker. So everything spins up. And here we have our simple front end that just at the moment displays like the simple value from our backend. So we have like a connection between frontend and backend. The Angular frontend is being set up, obviously. We are displaying like a simple value from the backend API, and everything is now ready to handle to make the next steps in the next videos. So let's start by looking at the story for this video. So here we are in video number 2, and we want to set up Angular with a Docker file and make a simple API connection to our backend. What we obviously need is like the Angular CLI for this and everything that we needed before. And our story is very simple. We want to set up our Angular frontend to be set up, and we want to display like a simple response from our backend. So this is basically like the basic stuff, so that we have everything running like we had before with our backend, so that we can then continue with the next steps in the next videos. And our criteria are: the Angular front end should be like set up, should be ready, should be running. It should be started with a Docker Compose or with our Docker Compose file, so as a service. And our Angular app should make a simple request against our backend and display this data so that we have like a connection. So the first thing that we want to check is like the version of our Angular CLI. So you can type in ng version, and if you do not have it, or you're having like an outdated version, so for example, I'm here at the latest one, you can just say here npm install -g Angular CLI, and then everything should be set up for you. So the next thing that we want to do is now we want to create our Angular front end, obviously, and for this we want to use the CLI. So we can just say Angular or ng new, and then we can just name it whatever we want. So we want it to be named Angular front end, and this will create like a new directory in our project folder here, and will set up the Angular application for us with all like the defaults that we want. So we want to have Angular routing, we want to use SCSS for his styling, and now this will create like all the stuff for us, and will also install directly like all the packages that we need from Angular. So now you can see we have here now our Angular frontend folder. So this is just red because I didn't add it to Git so far, and this I will do at the end of the video. So don't be distracted by this. So this is now installing all the packages, so we can just wait a bit, and we can also like continue. So the Angular CLI is having also some other commands. So what we used was the project one to create a project application. But there are like also other commands. For example, we can generate like files based on a schematic. For example, we can create like a service, we can create like a component with it. So we can just say Angular generate component or Angular generate module, everything that we want to do. So while this is installing, we can here continue with our stuff. So we can cd into our folder. So we say we want to go into our Angular frontend folder, and now we want to create like a public module where we can later handle like everything that is public, for example, to register a user or the login of a user. So we can say ng generate, and then we want to create like a module. The C is very slow, I think, because of the npm install. So ng generate module, and then we can just say we want to name this public, and then this should create like a public module in our source folder in Angular. So at the moment you can see we are having here our app. Our app component, so our base file at the moment, and our app module. So this is like our root module with the app routing module also. And this will now create like a new module here for us. At the moment, like my PC is very slow, but it should soon appear, I think. And we can also like generate also like the new module that we also want to have. So we want not just have like a public one, but also a private one where we can handle all the stuff that only be accessible after you logged in. So that is something that should be protected by JWT, for example, where we want to check who are you. So we want to authenticate you and make sure that you are like allowed to see this stuff. So this will also get created. And what we also can do is we can already create like a directory for some models that we want to use. And we can also create like a directory for some root services that we want to use. So later we can make a service into our public or private module, but we also will need some services here at the top, so in our root module, but we still can use them everywhere. So yeah, it's like getting very slow. So now we want to also create like our services folder. So before I just had to like close some stuff, so now my PC should be faster. So here in the services we then have like 1 or 2 services for test some stuff. So now we have like a base app here that we could also run. So for example, we can now say in reserve, and this should spin up like our Angular application, and then we could access it under port 4200. And while this is spinning up, you can see we have like a simple app component, which also has some style here. So this is like some basic CSS and some basic HTML. This I think has some links, for example, for Angular material, for PVA support, and so on. So some like a tutorial maybe. We have our module where we have imported like our browser module and the routing module. And in the routing module, I think at the moment there are no routes, but here we could like register like all the routes that we need later, and we then use it. Here we have like our package JSON with all our dependencies, all our commands or scripts that we want to start. So for example, ng-serve, build, watch, test, and all our dependencies here. Yeah, and so now let's wait till this is starting up. And then one of the next steps is that we can like create a simple test service and then try to query like our backend. And for this, we will have to like to modify or to proxy our request against our backend. So proxy it against our backend service. So that's running in our container, so in Docker. And for this, we can like create a simple proxy.conf where we like proxy all our requests against our backend. And then we can also add like our Docker file and our service to Docker Compose, and maybe make some adjustments for everything to work. So now let's see if we can open our frontend in the browser. So we can go to localhost 4200, and here you see our simple Angular front end. So yeah, now we could create like a service, so we can like stop this here, and we can say ng generate service test, and this will generate like a test service for us. This will like again still take a while. And now you see here we have our test service, and now we can just paste it in our services folder. And then we have like here a very simple service. So in here we want to query or go against our backend. So what we do need is like we need to connect via HTTP against our backend. So what we need is like we need the HTTP client from Angular. And with this we want to like simple query like or get some or fetch some data from our backend. So we can say we want to get a user by ID. And then what we want to pass in is like the number or the user ID that we want to get. And in return type, we are returning like an observable, so a value that will like later fulfill. And here we want to use our HTTP client, and we want to make a GET request. And then we want to make this against our /API users. And then we want to add here our ID, so we can use the backticks here. And with this we can like insert like a value with the dollar into our string, so the ID in this case. So then we can later make like a proxy conf for all our requests against /API to our HTTP API backend, so we can proxy them. And here we don't want to use like the any type, but at the moment we just want to get like a simple interface that we want to create. So this will be refactored or removed like in the next videos, but now we just want to make sure that we can connect against the backend. So we want to have like a simple value or an interface test that is just having like a value title that is just a string. And so we want to return like a test, and our get obviously also returns test. And this is something that we then can use. So for this to work, obviously we have to like adjust our backend service or our backend endpoint, because at the moment I don't think that it's like returning like a JSON, it's just returning like a string. So this could probably cause some issues. So we have to fix this in our backend also. And here we can simply go into our user controller. So we were calling like the get1. So we are getting here by ID. We have our user service find1. And here at the moment you see we are just returning a string, but what we want to return is like this title. So we can also say here export interface test, and this is a title, so this is like a string. And then in the find1 we want to return like this test, or this like with the title. So what we can say here is we want to return title, and then just make this like a object. Obviously, yeah, we wouldn't need this, so yeah. But this should then like return like the value that we need, because you can see it here in the controller. This is just passing through to the front end, the stuff that it gets from the server. So this is like returning now this title JSON. So this should now work. But what we do need now is like to proxy our requests like against our backend service, so in Docker. So what we can do in Angular is we can create like a proxy conf file that we can use to proxy requests against like our backend in this case. So we can create like a proxy conf.json, and here we just insert an object, and we want to have like all requests against API being like redirected to something else. So here we want to have like a target, and our target is our API service. So this is how it's named in our Docker Compose file, and this is running on port 3000. It's like not secure, and we want to change the origin. And now we have to tell Angular that it should run this or use this configuration. So for this, we can simply go into our angular.json. Where is it? Maybe you see it. I should have created this proxy conf in our front end, not in our back end. So let's copy and paste this file into our front end. So obviously we need it in our front end and not in our back end. So this proxy conf file we need now to reference in our configuration. So we have here like a serve configuration, so we can just search for serve because we just want to use this like in development stage. And here for development, we can just add like the proxy config and just give them the path where this is. And so this is under source, and then the proxy.conf.json. And now this should proxy all requests that are going against API to API 3000. So this should work now. And now we will need like to add like a Docker file to run our Angular application. So for this, we just create like a simple file that we name Docker file. And now we just go through everything that we need. So first we want to build everything. So what we want is we need like a node image. So the latest version is I think 16.16.0 that we were also using like in our backend, and we can just name this development. We want to set like a working directory, for example /homes front end source, and then copy like our package JSON, and we want to copy both, so we can use here like the wildcard, and we copy it to our working directory. So we copy from our folder here into our image, our package JSON files. And then what we can run is we run npm run build to bundle everything, and we want to expose like port 4200. And obviously later we can still make this a little bit better, but at the moment we just want it to be simply running and test it so that we can see that it's working. So now we have to add this to our Docker Compose. So at the moment we have our database admin, for example, to access it, and our API. And now we also want to add our front end. So let's make a comment and say Angular front end. And then we can just name this front end and say we want to build it from a Docker file, and this is obviously Docker file, the name, and the path here is our folder Angular front end, and we want to target like the development stage that we just created. We need a command, and here we want to use like the npm run start. So we want to use the start command, and you can look it up in the Angular in the package JSON. This start command will just run nreserve. Then we can add like a volume. So here we can reference our Angular frontend folder to our image path where we are working, and this should obviously be source app. And then we can also make our node modules folder. And then we can map like some ports. We can just say we want to map 4200 from inside the container to our host machine, also on port 4200. And this should be everything. And what we can also do maybe is we can say we just want to start it after like the backend is running. So we can simply say we depends on our API. So this makes sure that before our frontend is being started, the API is running, and so that we are able to connect against it and to obviously get the data, so that we have like the right order there, how the services are all starting. So, and then there's like a, I don't know if it's a bug or not, but if we are running like Angular with nreserve in our container, we have to modify like the start script, and this is like easier to explain with Stack Overflow. So if we just run the nreserve or the npm run start, then you won't reach it. And here we have to add like the host 000 to listen to all interfaces from inside the container. So then we can map like the 4200s, and then everything should work correctly. So what we need to do is in our package JSON for our starts command, we want to add like our host. So we say minus host is 0.0.0.0, and this goes to port 4200, and then we are running port 4200, and then everything should work fine. So like in the first video, I will also later add like everything that we do here as steps here, so that you can always go through it. So now we can just maybe modify our Angular frontend to use the service and to display like the simple data from our backend. So this string text. So at the moment, you know, we added this to our services, and now we want to use it in our root component and display like the value from our backend. And for this, first we have to add like our app module, also the HTTP client module. So this is also being spinned up because we need it in our service, and then we can easily delete everything in our HTML, our root component here, and then in our app component we want to use now our test service. So we will need like a constructor, and here we can give them the test service, and then we have like maybe value from backend, and we can name it with $. So this means that there's like an observable. So if we want, we can say it's an observable for our test interface. Let's see, will it find it? Can we import it? Yes. So we can import the interface from our service where we declared it, and then we can simply say this should be our test service dot get user by ID, and here we now specify like a static number. So like I said, this is like just a test. We could pipe it, but actually we don't need it. And now we can add this value here to our view, to our template. And we can simply say here, maybe this is like an h1, and interpolate like a template with our value from backend. And this we can pipe with the async pipe. So this automatically subscribes to our observable that we're getting from the service, so that it gets hot. And then we can say we want then it's there, so it's optional like the title. Did I misspell it? No, what's going on? I'm not seeing what I'm doing wrong. Give me 1 second. Maybe this looks all fine. A component HTML. So let's just already start like the services and see if it works, because normally this should be totally fine. Just I think my IDE is very slow, so let's maybe close all the files. Still not recognizing it. It's interesting. Yeah, so just let's wait. So normally this should work. I don't know, my IDE is very slow today. This is like the exact same name that I'm using here. So this is going to work. Don't worry. So this will now take a while till everything is spin up, and then we should be able to see everything in our browser on port 4200. So now it took just some time. So now after like the Docker Compose run, now it also recognizes the connection here. So this value, so this works. Here, and now everything here like built correctly. It got spin up. So now we can just have a simple look in our browser and see if we can, we get like the data here via our service from our backend, and our proxy works correctly. So now we can go to localhost 4200. And now you see here, this action returns a 1 user. So this is exactly what we are returning in our API, and what we are then adding here to our value. So what we display like the title that we are getting from the backend. So this works all fine. So now we just need to commit everything, and then that's basically it. So we can say git add -a, and then we say video 2 set up Angular. Let's also check against our user story before. So we have set up Angular. So we can say finished. Our Angular front end is being started with Docker Compose and Docker and the Docker file, and we're making a simple request against our backend, and we are displaying like the data. So we can say we set up Angular and Docker file and Docker Compose for the Angular front end, and then we can push everything.